Welcome to Dental Insight today. I am delighted to have Dr. Mike DeTola join us today. Mike, it's so good to see you. Welcome.
It's good to see you as well, Michael. It's been a while since we've seen each other. I know like a year or two ago, we were going to do something together for a line. Maybe it was a little more than that. Maybe it was 3 years ago. Maybe, I can't remember, but it was post-COVID and things were difficult. But yeah, you've always been somebody one of my friends in the lab industry and somebody who I liked bouncing ideas off. And as you know, I love the lab industry and I love dentistry. So I'm glad to hear that you're still staying active and you're doing a lot of super interesting things. Most of them still involved in dentistry. So good. We're glad to have you in the profession still.
As I mentioned to you, Mike, retirement for me means I went to Les Schwab and got new tires. I got retired. So,
That's
yeah,
yeah,
I'm
exactly.
having a lot
That's
of
funny.
fun. And this Dental
Good.
Insight today is part of that. It's partly a give back to my years in dentistry, which was over 47 before I sold the
Wow.
laboratories and over 70 for my family. So there's a lot of porcelain and cobalt chrome coursing through my veins for sure.
Exactly.
Well, Mike,
And
it's so great.
possibly your lungs.
Yeah, I hear you. It's so great to have you. So good to see you, and you're back in the chair. We're gonna talk some dentistry here. Let me go ahead and make sure our viewers today understand your background because it's a really interesting, strong background into not just chairside, but the world of dental labs as well. Dr. Mike DeTola is a 1988 graduate of the University of Pacific School of Dentistry. Gold Dr. Degoni was there when you were there, I believe, right? And you
Yeah.
were awarded your fellowship in the ADGD in 1995. Mike was in private practice for 15 years before becoming the director of clinical education at Glidewell Labs, where he headed that group for 15 years as well. And that gave Dr. DeTola an intimate understanding of the day in and day out of crown and bridge dentistry and also removable for dentists throughout the United States. From 2006 to 2009, he led the clinical team that developed and brought Bruxer solid zirconia to market. And Mike, what a change it's been since '09 when it was the bright white to where it is today. In 2011, you received the Most Effective Dentist Educator Award in a nationwide survey of dentists. Mike has given over 1,000 lectures to dentists worldwide. And get ready for this. His videos have been viewed over 15 million times by dentists worldwide. Wow. Mike is a member of the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, the ADA, the Academy of General Dentistry, the California Dental Association, and the San Joaquin Valley Dental Society. When not in the office, Dr. DeTola enjoys fly fishing, competing in triathlons, and listening to music. Mike, what a background. Again, welcome to Dental Insight today. Great to have you.
Thank you, Michael. Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So let's go right to first topic here, which is you spent 15 years at Glidewell Labs, and I know you're passionate about the dental lab industry. Do you have a vision for where you see laboratories going in the future?
Yeah, so during my time there, it was a real eye opener for me because I kind of understood labs the way most dentists do. You just send a case there and get something back. And when I got right out of school, I was using a bunch of different labs, and I thought they all sucked because I wasn't getting very good work back from any of them. And then one day I sat down and realized that the only thing that these 7 or 8 labs had in common was me sending these underprepared restorations and these so-so impressions. And that's, of course, why the work coming back wasn't very good. And I remember when I started at Glidewell, basically one of the Crown and Bridge managers there was a patient in my private practice. And he said, "Hey, we've got this new material, CapTech." This will show you how long ago that was. "We have this new material, CapTech, that we want to do on some patients, and Jim Glidewell wants to film it. You're off on Fridays. If you're not lecturing, can you come by and do it?" And so, sure, I was like, "Sure, I'll come by and do it." And we did it, and it was interesting. And so we did it on another Friday with some more CapTech crowns. And Procera was also a thing at the time, alumina oxide. So we did some of those. And then later that year, I got invited to the Glidewell Christmas party, and Jim Glidewell said, "Hey, we really like having you there. What would it take to have you come on full time?" And I was like, "Well, I'd have to sell my practice, and I'd have to get paid. I don't know. I shouldn't have answered, Mike. That was the problem. I should not have answered, but I said I'd have to get paid, and I threw out a number. And he says, "Yeah, let's do it." And I realized now he accepted it like a little too fast, and I didn't realize at the time how successful the laboratory was, but that was made. That took care of itself in time, and that's how I got started there. And so there was two big cameras filming everything that I was doing at the lab, and all my dentistry was now being seen on these like 45-inch monitors in the operatory. And to be honest, I was pretty mediocre at the time when it came to prepping and impressing. And I remember one time our mutual friend Rudy Ramirez, who was running the PFM department at the time, came up to me and pulled me to the side after seeing like some of my preps on the big screen and said, "Hey, it's going to have to get a whole lot better than that." And I just remember the sweat starting. I had hair at the time. I remember the sweat like starting to pour down because it was like, yeah, I know it's going to have to get better. And so we'll talk about that more a little bit later, what I had to do in order to get better. So, but once I was there, I started listening to my friends who were sending cases and talking to other dentists. And the biggest complaint that dentists had, and that's probably with most laboratories, is having to do too much adjustments on the crown, prior to seating these, and especially on the occlusion. And so high occlusion is one of the bigger complaints that you see. And so for some of the doctors who consistently had problems with high occlusion, I started personally just going down to the shipping department before their cases went out, and I would check on the articulator to see if the occlusion was good, and the occlusion was good. And so we'd see this case go out to the doctor, and then the doctor would send back a complaint, or it would be a remake because they had to adjust too much because the occlusion wasn't correct. And this just happened a lot. And we've got to find an answer for this and what's going on, because the dentists aren't happy. We're not happy about having to remake this. And if the dentist didn't reprep it, what are the chances this exact same thing happens? And so as we started looking at it, I started noticing it would happen from time to time on my own cases, which was crazy because I was in the laboratory, handpicking which technicians I wanted to work on it. And I would have the same issue. And I started to look a little closely at it. And it turns out the cause for all of this, for me and the other dentists as well, is the temporary crown. And how this happens, for the most part, it usually is a well-meaning dental assistant who really wants to polish this temporary so that it won't bother the patient's tongue and it looks nice. And what they're doing is inadvertently taking the temporary out of occlusion by, let's say, 400 microns, which is 4/10 of a millimeter, as you know. And so when you take a temporary crown 400 microns out and then you wait 2 weeks and the case comes back and you cement it 2 weeks later, that tooth is super erupted, and the crown that fit perfectly on the articulated monitor now does not fit in the mouth without a significant amount of adjustment. And even if it fits, you've just blown out the occlusal anatomy and it doesn't look really much like a crown anymore. And so we started doing something while we were in there where I just wanted to see where I had them, they couldn't do this for everybody right off the bat, but I was having them make the crowns for me basically in 3 days. And then I was seating the crowns. And the other thing I was doing was making sure that my assistant, I taught her that every time she seats a temporary, check the occlusion. And if there's not a little spot there, then we need to add some composite there because we need at least one centric stop on that temporary. And all of a sudden, I never had to do any adjustments anymore once we started ensuring that the temporaries had a centric stop. Now, I don't expect all dentists to be able to check every time. I mean, you should. There's no reason not to. It's the correct way to make it temporary. And I think it's easy to let Jim Glidewell used to always say that in the lab industry, if you're not paying constant, if you're not trying to improve quality all the time, it's naturally just going to slip a little bit. And everybody really doesn't say anything because it's close enough to be good, whether it's the dentist or the quality control people at the laboratory. And quality just, kind of has a tendency to slip. And the same thing can happen with temporaries. It's a good idea once a year just to sit down with your chairsides and remind them and do what we used to do in dental school. Take the temporary out and circle the proximal contact with a red pencil and say, don't touch this contact. You can't touch where it touches that adjacent tooth. We're not even going to polish that because we don't want to leave an open contact there and have the tooth drip. And again, reinstate how important it is to have that centric stop on the temporary. But in order to really do all this, my push for the dental industry and what I want to see labs do, and I push labs to do this all the time, and Glidewell is the only one who's coming really close to it, is the concept of 3-day crowns. This whole idea of seating crowns 2 weeks after we prepare them, I don't even know where this came from. I mean, the PFM was invented in 1959 back in Detroit, Michigan, by Dr. Joseph Land and some laboratory technician. And I think when the very first PFM was done, Michael, he said to his lab tech, how long is it going to take you to do this? And the lab tech was like, I don't know. We got to cast the metal and then use this new ceramic oven. And I don't know, 2 weeks. And he was like, yeah, that's fine. We'll do that. And that's probably where it came. And so ever since then, it's been okay. And that's been the standard, is to see crowns after 2 weeks. Now, of course, then we had Sarek. I spent time at Serona where you can do same day crowns where you don't even have a temporary. And that changes things a lot because you don't have the temporary influencing the fit of the final crown. But that's a big capital investment for dentists, and even more difficult is learning to design crowns for them. And they like letting their lab tech do that because their lab techs are good at it, even if it's just a single unit posterior. But some dentists are doing that. We're doing it in our office for posterior single unit cases, and multiple units here and there. But I want to see the industry move from 2 weeks to 3 days. And so two of the people who worked at Glidewell City and Kevin have a lab now called 38 Smiles, and their other name for their lab is 3-day crowns. So if you Google 3-day crowns, they come up, and if you send them a digital file, so this is the only way to do a 3-day crown, is you have to have a scanner, scan it, send it to them, and it takes 3 days to make the crown and send it back to you. And we should be you. And so the dentists are going to have to get used to scheduling people sooner. It's hard to trust because we're doing 2 weeks for so long. It's hard to trust it's going to come back when you count the working days, but it's easy to count when it's going to get back. And we all know, every dentist knows that if you leave a temporary on for 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, the longer the temporary is on, the less of a chance the crown's going to fit. And I'm here to tell you the opposite is true as well. The shorter the temporary is on, the higher the chance that you won't have to do any adjustments and it will just drop into place. Glidewell is actually at 4 days in lab right now, so they're getting very close to 3 days, and 4 days is absolutely admirable. And I'm going to ask you in just a second why you think laboratories have such difficulty doing it, but dentists will often relate a story where they typically get crowns back in 2 weeks from their lab, and like, let's say that it's been 2 weeks, like tomorrow on Thursday, and you're supposed to be seating a crown. And then on Tuesday, you get a call from the lab 2 days before, and they say, hey, we didn't get a shade on that case. What shade is it? And you're like, why did they wait until 2 days before the crown was due to ask what shade it was? And it's like, because they didn't start the crown until 2 days before. They've had it for a week there, but either they don't have enough employees or they're just not set up to do it in 3 days. But the temporary crown is, it's kind of evil in a way. Not evil, but it's kind of unnecessary. It's necessary sometimes, but it's not hopefully necessary all that much to leave it on for that long, especially on posterior teeth that can super erupt. Now, if they're anterior crowns from 5 through 12 or whatever, 7 through 10, that's different because we're really not having that kind of super eruption and problems getting crowns to seat. So 3-day crowns, what Cindy and Kevin do is for all single unit posterior teeth, it's available for that. For bridges, for anterior ones, yeah, it's going to take longer, and that's fine because it's going to take them more time to do. But a zirconia crown can be milled same day. If you send them a digital file, it'll get sintered overnight and it's ready the next day. Emax could be milled, pressed the same day, and then sent out. So I want to get rid of this 2 to 3 week seat time that's always been there in dentistry. Every practice, I want to shrink that to 3 days because it's in the best interest of the tooth, the patient, and the practice as well. And we have to adapt to this. We should be doing more single posterior units in our office without a temporary, but if you're not set up to do that, this 3-day thing is, and it's going to help the labs too, because there's going to be less remakes and adjustments from dentists having to blow out the occlusal anatomy. That's my vision of the future for the lab.
I will tell you, I completely agree with you. Number two, before I retired from the dental lab industry, my laboratory was making crowns in 3 days. And dentists appreciated that. Now, some practices, they still have to wait to get the patient back because of scheduling and trying to get the patient in. But I think more and more laboratories are recognizing that there's no reason for it to take that long. And I think more and more laboratories, particularly the ones that are thriving, are recognizing that what Gordon Christensen has said for years is true. We want things done in a way where it's better, faster, and easier. So we want to be manufacturing not as a hobby shop, but as a just-in-time business. So I think dental lab industry is trending in that direction. It's interesting, Mike, before we go on to that next subject that I have for us today, one of my last lectures, I did it to the Sacramento, for the Sacramento District Dental Society in 2003, was to lab or not to lab. That was a theme that
Mhm.
they had. And you mentioned to me before we got together today that you've got a mill coming in from the folks at Glidewell. You have an intraoral scanner, and you're about to get a printer. So really, my point, and I'd love to get your perspective on this. I think dentistry is going down a path where your lab's still very important, but there's more and more stuff that you're going to be doing, quote, on the lab side that makes perfect sense for you to do in your office. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that any GP works with specialists who does root canals and more difficult denture cases, or maybe all on four cases if you don't do it. But most dentists do the simple procedures that they can do. I do a lot of orthodontics now. I do class one, class two cases, but the class three cases I send to a classmate of mine who's an orthodontist in the same building because he's a specialist and he does those special cases. That's really what I see the role of the dental laboratory being in the future as a specialist. And so we should be making the easy things in our office because we put a temporary crown on today for 2 weeks, or most dentists do, with a temporary cement that's designed not to be a cement because we have to be able to take it off, in 2 weeks and pull it off without using explosives or having to cut it off, hopefully. So we know the margins aren't perfect on it. So we're putting on a crown that's going to kind of leak. It's made from a soft plastic that can wear, if it even has an occlusal stop on it, it can wear if it's 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. So the same day crown, and especially with zirconia in a posterior single unit, it's just not a high aesthetic area or anything like that. But when it comes to bigger bridges or anterior cases where you need the true artistry of a CDT to be able to create the smile of the patient's dreams, that's absolutely what they should be doing. And they should probably be charging a little more than they are charging. And so it should be like a specialist where we're doing the easy general things in the practice and we're sending to the lab these more special cases. And since there are special cases, they should be charging more and providing the service to kind of justify that fee as well. So that's really what I think. And patients, so not only do they enjoy not having to get numb a second time because they're already anesthetized when we seat the crown on a same day appointment, it's we try to get men to floss all the time, and that's just because they don't own a Collis curved toothbrush, so they have to floss. I know that if you use that toothbrush, you don't have to floss, but we can try to get men to floss and they won't do it until we put a temporary on and tell them not to floss around there. Then for some reason, because we told them not to, they will floss and they'll pop it off, and then they won't come in. They'll wait another week and the tooth will really super erupt. So I see the future of the laboratory being more as a specialist and just doing the more difficult things well that we couldn't accomplish same day because they just wouldn't nearly be as good.
Mike,
So I don't know. What
let
do you
me
think about
ask you,
that
what
concept?
was the answer is obvious when it comes to having your own mill, right? Same day dentistry, single visit dentistry. You've got a printer on the way. What was your motivation for getting a printer?
The motivation for the printer is I do a lot of cases using some software called Smile Architect, which we'll probably talk about later from Align. And basically, what it allows you to do is take a patient and who's in Invisalign and put their teeth exactly where you need them to be for the restorative dentistry. So my favorite thing to do is when we do Invisalign now, but somebody still has ugly teeth. They say they're ugly, and so they want veneers afterwards. We take the teeth and instead of our normal setup, we tip them back 1 or 2 degrees to the lingual to make room for that 3/10 of a millimeter for the no prep veneer, so they don't look too bulky. But then we have to scan it and we have to wait, 7-ish business days to get the retainer back from Align. But this is a patient who just finished Invisalign, so their teeth are very prone to move at this part. So I need to be able to print same day retainers to be able to put on patients. And since I bought this practice a couple of years ago, mainly what I've been doing is just veneers, Invisalign, and obstructive sleep apnea stuff because I was diagnosed with it a couple of years ago. And so I'm now very passionate about that as well. But I've had to do a couple like class two composites, and I hate them as much as I always did. It just feels like such an inferior restoration to me, the way we're just packing stuff in and curing it. And I don't know. Yeah, it's like it's a better looking version than an amalgam filling, but in some ways you don't have to worry about the amalgam curing. Sure, it's full of mercury and it's ugly, but I just feel like we're not doing really good. So I want to be able to do inlays, but I want to be able to do them without having to temporize. And so Sprint Ray is a company who's working with Align and working with Ivoclar, and they've come out with this Midas material. And Glidewell has other stuff that you can do like this, where you can just literally scan a prep for a class 2 restoration that you would have done a direct composite, and then print the composite inlay and cement it in. So it's totally cured out of the mouth. You don't have to worry about the C factor of the wall shrinking. You don't have to worry about packing it in if you're getting bubbles or anything like that. You just cement it in with a resin cement. And I think that could change the future of class 2 restorations, because the reimbursement rates are really pretty low, and all the time it takes to do it, and the remakes and the sensitivity, sometimes there's got to be a better way to do these
You
restorations. And I think the
anticipate.
dentists, the past had it right doing gold inlays. It's just they don't get reimbursed anymore. And I think there's an easier way to
Right,
do it.
right. Let me ask you, Mike, on that sprint rate printer coming in, will you be printing temporaries for either singles or 3-unit bridges?
Yeah, I can see doing that. We can also mill those. We mill those now with the Biotemps Now blocks on our Glidewell mill, and so we mill them that way. But milling, feels very wasteful when
Right.
you watch things get milled, or you watch zirconia get milled. All you're having to clean up all the powder and everything else. So printing, if we can get to the point, and Sprint Ray's actually talking about using this material as a crown material, which would be fine, but it's got the flexural strength of Empress. It's about 110 megapascal. So you're definitely bonding it into place. And dentists have shown they want, for the most part, want high strength crowns like solid zirconia, because that silly video we made at Glidewell, the hammer test, shook a lot of dentists and really was, kind of the only video I've ever been involved with that kind of went viral. And it just kind of struck a chord with dentists about how strong this was, and they're tired of things breaking. And I think that's part of the reason Bruxer took off the way it did.
It was a great analogy, yeah, for you guys to do that. Um, Next subject, you're coming up, we're coming up on the midwinter in Chicago, a great town to visit in February,
Yeah, exactly.
for a variety of reasons. You're speaking this year, and as part of Lab Day, and I believe you're speaking on the subject of how to achieve better aesthetic results. So, what are your thoughts from the perspective of the lab, first of all? And what should a lab be doing to help the doctor get the best aesthetic results possible today?
Yeah, we were talking before we started up, and we were talking about how Glidewell just makes things convenient, and their service is great and things like that. And this goes, what I'm about to tell you, I think, is something that smaller labs can do, and can do fairly easily, and all of a sudden be on an equal playing field with some of these larger labs when it comes to supporting their dentists. It's just I don't think a lot of labs have thought about this, and I don't think they necessarily think that dentists want to do this. But we just kind of stumbled on this at Glidewell, because Cindy, my technician, who was making the vast majority, if not all, my restorations, at least the aesthetic ones. I learned pretty early on that if I had her come into the operatory when we were working on a Glidewell patient, and I had prepared some anterior teeth, I learned to have her come in the room and have her look at the preps and say, "Am I done? Do I need to prep anymore?" And she would look at it and she'd instantly go, "Can you round the distal of 7 and 10, please? And can you shorten number 6? And just in the gingival third of number 8, can you reduce just a little more?" And then she'd go, "Okay, now you're done." I said, "Do you need to see the pre-op model?" She said, "No, why would I need to see the pre-op model?" And I said, "So you know how much I prepped?" And she said, "Oh, I don't need to see how much you prepped. I can just look at the preps and tell if we have enough reduction for Emax." I was like, wow, I can't do that. And really, no dentist can. And so as dentists, we always are taking the pre-op model, and we hopefully know how much we're supposed to reduce. Minimum material thickness for Emax is the millimeter, so we need to reduce a millimeter. Hopefully we're using a depth cutter. But as dentists, we're always looking at the pre-op model and then looking at what we prepped to see if we prepped enough. But technicians don't need to do that. They don't need to see the prep. They can just look at the preps and tell you if they have enough. And so the big lesson for me was, as soon as I had Cindy come in and approve my preps, and I'd make the changes she wanted, she said, "Yep, you're done." I always got great looking restorations back. And the crowns were never bucky again, or things didn't look weird because I hadn't prepped enough. And so I would just have her come in and look at it, and it was great. So you have to be humble enough to invite the technician in. And you need to realize as a dentist that the technician sees things in a different way than you do. They're the ones building the crowns. No dentist I know is, well, except for CEREC dentists, have made Emax crowns, but most of our experience in dental school was making one metal coping or a cast gold crown or something like that. Most of us have never worked with ceramics or Emax, and so we don't know how to build it. And so one of the things that Cindy does now, and Align's been really good about this since they purchased exocad. You can do this with exocad now. is when I'm setting up a case, one of those Smile Architect cases where I'm setting up the case where I want the teeth to end in Invisalign. I'll share it. You can share it with your laboratory. So I'll share it with Cindy and I'll say, do you like where these teeth are set up? And here's like the veneers that I've got on top of them. And she can go in and make adjustments either to the teeth or either to the veneers themselves. And it's not the actual design file for the veneers that we're doing. It's not an engineering blueprint. It's more of an architectural blueprint, just making sure we have the teeth in the right place to do these no prep veneers. And so what I'd like to see labs start doing is it can just be with FaceTime. I've got a lot of videos in this lecture I'm doing at Lab Day showing Cindy doing it via FaceTime with the doctor, patient still in the chair, still anesthetized, and does the scan. And Cindy pulls up the scan and looks at it and says, reduce a little here, reduce a little here. You have to be, this is what true teamwork is about. True teamwork is not we prep, take an impression, send the patient home, lab gets it 2 days later, and we say, do your best. That's
Yeah.
not teamwork. That's not even planning. And so in the planning stage, we should be sharing it back and forth. And with exocad connector, you can share treatment plans back and forth where you're looking at the veneers. You can see what you need to do for the preparations. If you're doing Invisalign, you can move the teeth in the right position so that you've got the room for the veneers. And this I call it live coaching while the patient's still in the chair. And so this is a level of service that patients have never seen before, where the artist who's making the veneers is on the phone with you. You can be wearing AirPods like this, and you can't hear what the lab technician is saying in front of the patient if you don't want them to.
Right.
But we need to bring the technicians in early in the process to get these great results. It was really the secret to why I was able to get great looking cases, because my preps were never screwed up again. Cindy made sure that they were prepped exactly where they needed to be prepped. So we need to bring our technicians in. We need to let them know it's okay to critique our preps and tell us where we can prep more if we really want to get the best results, because it's scary to do these anterior cases where the only reason you're doing them is for aesthetics. And some dentists just don't have the confidence, especially more recent graduates, whether or not these restorations are going to look good. You want a CDT who's got 20, 30 years of experience
Yeah,
telling you what to
Mike,
do with these
those are
preps and helping you guide you.
absolutely great points. And one of the points now with this in the world of digital dentistry, if let's say you're that younger dentist or you've not done a lot of aesthetic dentistry as a well-experienced dentist, you can have a prep guide just off of a study model with a digital impression, right? Or a
Mm-hmm.
standard impression. The laboratory can give you a prep guide, can give you a digital wax up, can put you in a position where until you are extremely comfortable with the depth reduction, and we're going to talk about the reverse prep technique and the brilliance of that in a bit here as well. But the point is there's so much labs can do, large and small, that are digital, that haven't been resting on their laurels, right? They've been staying with the times, where they can take the dentist who's not comfortable with that complex anterior case, whether it's prep or no prep, and really get them in a position of a great confidence builder, right? And that's where we
Yeah.
are today, and that is such a boon to restorative dentistry, to aesthetic dentistry. And again, that instance which I just gave you is one where you've not yet prepped and you want to have an idea of, okay, here's the game plan, here's the chairside guide to follow, all the way to what you were alluding to specifically, which is, hey, the patient's in the chair, and let's do a quality control check before we press send on that digital impression. What incredible changes! And I think the point you're underlining is, if your lab is stayed with the times and they're really making sure they understand what can be done with their technologies now on the lab side, boy, are they a great partner. And they don't have to be down the street. They could be 1,000 or 8,000 miles away. We're really in an incredible world in what we can do today. By the way, I just wanted
And I
to
actually,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I just wanted
I
to, are
actually
you
think,
familiar with
so
ShadeWave?
what's that?
Are you familiar with
No,
ShadeWave? Well, ShadeWave
no,
is
go ahead.
you can use your iPhone, and if you got that single central where you can
Mm-hmm.
tell it has Maverick colors going on for that anterior case where shade is really an issue, I highly recommend the app called ShadeWave. Mike, you take your iPhone, it's not Android, and you download it. It's easy to learn. You tell the iPhone snap, and it takes the picture. And you can very easily, with labs that have got the ShadeWave software, it's going to color map. It's artificial intelligence. It's going to say A2 here, B3 here, and it puts the laboratory in a position where, again, they do not have to be next door. where
Right.
they have every reason to, with a bullseye, nail that single central, which is can be an extremely difficult thing to do. Let's go on to this reverse preparation technique. 20 years ago, you really brought it to dentistry. What is it about the reverse prep technique that still has merit today?
I just downloaded Shaywave, by the way. I just wanted you I wanted to know. I write down everything you
Yeah.
say because I always learn
Hey,
from you. And yes,
uh,
so I'm glad to do that. And just to close up that last point, I think smaller labs are actually better suited for that live coaching than larger labs because the technician at a smaller lab, at your mom and pop lab, or even a medium-sized lab where you know your technician and they're making it, they're the ones on the phone with you. And I think dentists feel vulnerable sharing their preps with somebody else and letting them
right.
see what their work really looks like, even though they see it anyway. But it's like now you're asking for feedback on there. And so at larger labs, you never really know which technician is making your case, and you're really probably not talking to that person if you get to talk. So I think small labs trying to compete with the bigger labs are really well suited for this live coaching, and it actually suits their business model better than I think it does the larger
Right.
labs. So
Right.
that's one
Right.
way I think they can stay current. So yeah, as I said, Rudy came up to me and said, "Hey doc, this is going to have to get a lot better." And so I knew what a good prep was supposed to look like. I could draw it on a piece of paper. I went to dental school with my cousin David, who just had talent dripping off of his hands. I mean, this guy, from the first time he carved the tooth out of wax, it just looked amazing, and mine looked awful. And so, I learned pretty early on that I have a very average to below average set of hands. So I wasn't going to be able to rely on those to prep better. I knew I was going to have to use my brain somehow to try to make it better. So I just started researching every prep technique I could find, looking for something that made sense to me, where I could get the results, because I could tell you what was wrong with that prep, what was great about that prep. I just couldn't do it with my hands in the mouth. And I ordered this old prosthodontic textbook off eBay from the 1940s. And there was actually a prosthodontist who was doing this technique with like a belt driven handpiece before even air driven handpiece. And the thing that he did that I found really interesting was prepping the margin with a round burr, which is something I never thought about before. And so I was trying all kinds of different depth cutters and other things to try to get better results, because the number one complaint from most laboratories about their dentists, and it really doesn't matter if you're an entry level lab or a real high end lab, it seems like every lab has the same complaint. It's typically under reduction. Dentists aren't reducing enough. And it's because we're just trying to eyeball it. We're trying to be artists. We should be engineers. There is some artistry in dentistry, obviously, but it's really not that much in preparation. We should stick more to engineering principles and minimum material thicknesses and stuff like that. Sometimes calling it artistry is just a lazy way to not have a technique or a checklist to use. And every time I get in an airplane, it doesn't matter how old the pilots are, if they've been flying for 35 years, they use a checklist because they don't want anything wrong to happen, because it's easy to just forget one thing. And basically, I designed a bird kit that was kind of like a checklist where I go step by step by step. And the first time I used this reverse preparation technique to prep a tooth, I remember looking in my mirror at the prep, and I'd never done a prep that good before in my life. And I handed the mirror to my assistant, Jennifer, and I said, take a look at that. What do you think? And she looked at it and she goes, I can't believe you did that. I was like, you're not allowed to say that. I can think that to myself, but you're not supposed to say you can't believe. It looked like I had like passed out in the middle of the prep and they dragged Gordon Christensen in to finish it, because it looks so good. And it's called the reverse preparation technique because it's exactly backwards from how I was taught to prep teeth in school. And I think the way most dental schools teach dentists to teach preps is backwards and is the most difficult way. And I think the top 10% of the class doesn't have a problem with it because they can do it anyway. I feel bad for the other 90% of the class because it is the most difficult way to prep, at least for me. And I know that a lot of dentists, average dentists, I connect with them because we make a lot of the same mistakes and we have a lot of the same habits and
Mike,
same
let
challenges.
me
And so,
interject here. Let's just go to the first thing you do. And I believe I'm remembering this correctly. I actually did a video about the technique myself years ago. You're making depth cuts. That's the
yeah.
first thing you're doing. Take it from there. Why are we doing depth cuts first?
Well, can I go back to one step before that?
Sure,
There is
please.
one other important step. We break the contacts first.
Thank you.
Okay, and let's say we're prepping tooth number 9. We break the contacts first, which isn't the important part. That's pretty much standard for any prep technique. But then we drop a double zero cord into place. And we drop the double zero cord in because it's going to retract the tissue about half a millimeter. And so now when we prep the margin at the level of the tissue, when that cord comes out, it's going to be half a millimeter subgingival. We don't want the patient to see the junction between the restoration and the tooth. And there's a huge movement today. Dentists are like tired of packing cord. They don't want to pack cord anymore. And so some dentists aren't using anything, or diode laser, which I love on posterior teeth. It's fine, but not
What
on
about
anterior
something like
teeth.
Exposil?
Yeah, it just doesn't do the same thing as cord. There's something about that physical cord. Yeah, it'll
Got it.
stop bleeding, but I have epinephrine in my cord because that's what Gordon Christensen uses, and he says that if the patient can handle epi in their local anesthetic injection, they can handle it in the cord, and he's right. That's exactly been my experience too. We're going to end up using two cords by the end of this procedure because that is the gold standard for getting a great impression. And one of my favorite quotes in dentistry, I don't know if you've heard this, Michael, is from Bill Strupp. He says, a crown and bridge impression is simply a measure of the dentist's integrity, nothing more and nothing less. And it's like such a badass quote that it's like, it should shock you to go, oh, yeah, I think he's right. And it's absolutely true. So there's just no room for like not taking great impressions. So we break the contacts, the double zero cord comes in. Then the next thing I do, it is kind of the depth cut, but the very first thing I do is I prep the margin of the crown. So we're going to prep the margin of the crown, the very first thing with this round burr. Usually, I was taught in dental school, you prep everything first and the margin last. That is absolutely the hardest way to prep the margin. I prep the margin first while the rest of the tooth structure is still there. And if anybody wants to go online, just Google reverse preparation technique. It's all over the place. The video's on a bunch of different sites, so you'll be able to see it. But we prep that margin first. Very easy with the round burr. The round burr gives you a perfect half circle cut in the gingival third, right above the gingiva. And then when you do the rest of the reduction after the depth cuts, you have this perfect quarter circle. This is exactly what we want a chamfer to look like. So easy to get a uniform margin 360 degrees around there. And then we start using depth cuts. And I just wanted to use depth cuts because I was getting tired of getting yelled at by Rudy and the other managers at Glidewell about under reducing. I just wanted to get them off my back. And so I was going to prep the right amount. What I didn't realize is if you prep the right amount by using depth cuts in different parts of the teeth, by the time you reduce everything so you can't see the depth cuts anymore, it looks like a perfect prep. I didn't expect that. I just thought I'm going to get them off my back by not under reducing anymore. But it turns out when you reduce the right amount in the right areas, that's how you get to a perfect prep. Now, my cousin David can just look at a tooth, and you can probably give him any burr, and he can prep a perfect prep. I'm more like paint by numbers with the depth cuts. I always put the depth cuts in the same places. The depth cuts vary based on if we're doing zirconia or emax or a bilayered restoration like a porcelain fusion zirconia, something like that. But then by the time you connect them all, it ends up being a great prep, and it's not under reduced. And now that labs are all digital, as you know, Michael, with 2 clicks of a mouse, they can click on the highest point of your prep in the opposing tooth and tell you to the 100th of a millimeter how much you reduced. And there's no more he said, she said, where we get to say, no, I'm pretty sure I prepped enough. They're like, no, it's 0.68 millimeters of reduction, and we need 1 millimeter for Emax. Labs are able to check our homework with 2 clicks of a mouse. We can't fly by the seat of our pants anymore. As dentists, we have to step our game up and start doing depth cuts. Now, also with my Invisalign scanner, with my 5D Plus, when I'm done prepping a tooth, and I do the impression and scan it with my digital scanner, I can just click and it'll show me how much I reduced. Yeah. So that's great, but I don't want to have to fix it after the fact. So I still use the depth cuts to this day when I'm prepping teeth.
But I think there's an expression in carpentry, measure twice, cut once. The depth cut is your measurement being done for you, right? Before you cut. And I will tell you, the videos that you did during your Glidewell tenure, those are perfect preps. They're beautiful preps. And you did it very simply and straightforwardly using the reverse prep technique. And you
with a below average left hand.
Yeah.
With a left hand, it's not great.
You look better than you're giving yourself credit for, because you used a tool to enable you to do that. I'm really glad that you mentioned it, because we should all be looking for things in life that are going to make things easier, right? Going back to Dr. Christensen, better, faster, easier. Why make things more difficult? Yeah, we want consistency in what we do, and particularly when it comes to a product that you're going to rely on the laboratory to make, because of course, when things don't work out, when there's adjustments or other matters, then it's a matter of having to debug. Why did the plane not land successfully? What's going on here, right? And that's a hassle. And there are ways to minimize that in the reverse prep technique, along with good temporization, 2 very critical factors, right, to achieving consistent success in what we do. Um, you were on a podcast recently where you talked about how you like with taking a case that would have been a prep case in the past and making it into a no prep case. Tell us more about why you like that approach. Hey guys, that was part one with Dr. Mike DeTola. I hope you have enjoyed watching Mike and listening to his insights as much as I have. Now get ready for part two coming up. You're going to learn more about his current clinical techniques, material science, and what he thinks are your biggest priorities in dentistry, whether you are young in your career or getting toward the golden years. So please check out part two of the Dr. DeTola interview. And before you go, number one, please subscribe to Dental Insight Today. We really appreciate you watching us. And number two, please go to our sponsor, which is righttouch.com. Right, as in write the English language, touch.com. There's a link below. Right Touch is a great way to recognize your patients automatically throughout the year through handwritten like Hallmark cards that do a great job of creating a relationship, recognizing special events in the patient's life, and really making them feel much warmer and more fuzzy about your concern for them as a valued patient. So check out Right Touch. And now on to part two with Dr. Mike DeTola. Thanks much.